Three, two, one, live. Our guest tonight is Alex Porter. He's Chief Operations Officer at Scottsdale Providence Treatment Center in Scottsdale, Arizona. How you doing, Alex?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Pretty good, man. So, how are you dealing with this? All the stay-at-home time? Are you deep cleaning your bathroom, organizing the garage? What have you been up to?
All of the above. I've been trying. I mean, we're fortunate that we're still open, so work's been incredibly busy. But trying to balance between that and then balancing, home life, taking care of, I have organized garage. I've cleaned out some closets. Just doing this 45-minute David Goggins workout earlier in the backyard, which only made it about three-quarters of the way through. But trying to preserve my sanity, keep my, mental health in order, and I don't know. I mean, I think that some people seem like they've been struggling mightily, and I'm fortunate to be part of the group that still has, employment and job, and so that hasn't slowed down at all. It's created some difficulties, problem solving with, implication of new protocols as far as like infection control and stuff, but kind of managing the staff and my personal life. I feel like I'm not deeply affected by it yet, which I'm grateful for, but it has, created a little bit of difficulty, throwing its throwing some difficulty into my, daily routine.
Yeah, and how about your sobriety? I mean, you've been sober a few 24 hours, but do you find like the lack of live meetings and kind of that personal contact? I guess you get it at work too, but for like your own self-care and your personal recovery, what kind of changes have you had to make in that?
So yeah, so that's been a little bit more difficult. And I mean, you're right to some degree, right? Like I do get that at work. But caring for others is not the same as self-care, right? And especially when it comes to like my recovery, like it's kind of the two things, although they kind of help each other, they're definitely like independent of each other. And I have this weekly like accountability meeting, sort of like a lineage meeting, with my old sponsor and some other guys. And we were kind of talking about that last night, how I think I'm finally starting to feel the effects of the lack of in-person meetings. Although Zoom has made it possible that, we're able to do this podcast or still able to attend meetings and actually attend, I'd say the frequency of meetings I've gone to has increased, but it's not the same kind of interaction. And I guess like the mindfulness, there's more distraction when you're at home. You don't have to be as engaged. So I think there's that intangible aspect of like, meetings and how recovery works, and that social network that like 12 step provides that is definitely lacking. So I'm doing my best. I think for me, and it's just myself, right? Like I'm grateful for the fact like I've been sober, over a decade now, and I've kind of figured out what parts of the program to like most utilize for myself. And I prior to this, was only attending a couple meetings a week, working with some sponsees and stuff like that. So those couple meetings that I do attend, including the home group, I think I felt a significant, loss in those areas. So I've tried to make up for it by attending more virtual meetings, staying plugged in, accountable, and talking to more people in recovery.
Or
But
are
it's been difficult to navigate.
those virtual meetings? Those I guess they're probably Zoom meetings for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Are they tending to be local meetings that where you already know the people, or are you finding some new meetings where you don't know anyone? How's that working out?
I'd say a combination of both. Some of them are meetings that I've, consistently attended. And then some are, I have a friend who, lives in a different state and is like, hey, come to my home group, or, I've gotten sent some links, even of some local meetings that I generally don't attend. So I have been able to branch out and kind of either attend meetings that I'm not able to otherwise because they occur on days of the week I can't attend. Or I also, have friends, like I said, in other areas, or somebody speaking at this meeting, hey, come check it out. So it's a combination of both.
Right. So you got sober about 10 years ago. Well, talk about your history a little bit. What was your, you know, drug of no choice? What was what was your poison? How did that work for you, and what happened?
So prior to, I would say prior to drugs, right? It was, I was kind of in a way like looking for I was always looking for something else. I felt like, it's often defined as like kind of restless, irritable, and discontent. That restlessness was definitely true with me. So prior to drugs, right, I was trying to find excitement, whether it was breaking stuff or starting fires, firecrackers, skateboarding, music, stuff like that. Around the age of 13, it was the first time that like I smoked some weed and I drank, and I mean those things initially, right? Like there was no real consequences. I was in junior high, had some friends, we'd hang out, get drunk, have fun. Like I said, no real consequences. Then enter about high school, and I had progressed to taking some pills, tranquilizers, muscle relaxers, sort of like whatever we could get our hands on. And then I think around the age of 15 is when I had this kid in a shop class, and I think his mother had some kind of terminal illness, so he had bags of painkillers, and he would just sell us like $1 a pill. So we just started buying a bunch of pills, not really understanding. I mean, I had heard, like opiates, and this was 2003, 2002. So like I'd known that like heroin and other opiates, right? Like they create like there's the physical component. But I had just started taking painkillers every day. Oxycontin was a big one. It had just kind of come out. So I started taking that every day. And then all of a sudden, a couple months later, I don't have one day. I don't feel well. Then I get one. I feel all right. I'm like, oh, that wasn't the flu. I think I'm physically addicted. So around like the age of like, I think late 15, so around 16, I have some friends who are like, let's do heroin. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. They're like, well, hey, $5 is the equivalent of $80 of Oxycontin. So I was like, all right, I'm in. We didn't know what we were doing. So we were, mixing it in a spoon and pouring it down our noses. But then quickly, turned to intravenous drug use. So by the time I'm like 17, full blown, you know, IV heroin / methadone user. And
So,
then
I mean, what was going on at home during this time? Were your parents aware of like, did they see the changes in your behavior? What was going on with school? I mean, it seemed like, how do you hold your life together when you're a full blown heroin addict at 17?
it's a good question. So and here's the thing, right? Is that my mother, she's a therapist, and my dad, he's a successful businessman. I came from a, by all accounts, incredibly loving, supportive environment. I think that I was pretty good. Like when I initially started taking a lot of painkillers, my mom sometimes would be like, your pupils look small, and I fight around that. But I feel like after I kind of developed, a steady habit, I think I was one of the people, because I had a lot of friends who later didn't really know I was like, using heroin every day. I had the people I used with, but I was pretty functional. Meaning like I think I still graduated high school with like a 3.8 GPA. And that went on to college where I completed like 3 out of 4 years of ASU, um, you know, Dean's List several times, et cetera, while smoking crack and doing heroin. So I think I had always in my mind, it had been implanted, right? Like that, if nothing else, right? Like I need to securing an education will help, like, harness a productive future. So like in my mind, when everything else kind of was falling by the wayside, I, for whatever reason, am grateful that school wasn't too difficult for me. And what had happened was, right, is that like, as you alluded to, my parents start, wondering, you're acting a little different, you're acting erratic. And I think now, like being in recovery and or working in treatment and seeing people and their loved ones like recovering from things, I think that there's that thing where it's easy to identify in somebody else, but when it's a loved one, there's almost that you don't really want to know, and you kind of want to give them the benefit of the doubt. So the heroin use, I was able to sustain and use makeup on my arms, etc. And then I started shooting a lot of cocaine, and my behavior changes rapidly, and it all kind of culminates in I'm not at this point, right? I'm still in high school, but I don't no longer have a vehicle. I was constantly getting in trouble for things, stealing money, etc. I don't think that they knew the severity of it, right? It was a nice, for lack of a better word, white, suburban neighborhood in East Mesa. And so, there's a lot of other kids kind of doing similar things. I don't think you would think, there's this level of, heavy drug use occurring. But I guess long story short, I'm not being able to fall asleep, not waking up for school. My parents find, a bunch of syringes and stuff in my room, and pretty much like, hey, here's the deal. We don't know what to do. We're going to take you to detox. And at that point, I mean, I had been, I didn't get sober at this point in time, but I had been miserable for a period of time in which I was like, I can't keep going on this way. And I was kind of hoping to get caught. But at the same time, I didn't know how to ask for help, nor did I think it was possible. So I did pretty well at managing it for, up until like second semester of my senior year. And then it kind of all
Did
just
all that give you
collapsed.
kind of a sense of invincibility? Like, well, I can still maintain my grades and I can, you know, get by and everything. And so what's the problem? Or, but how did that work? I mean, were you kind of like, was there a sense of denial there or something like that?
I think, as well as I can remember, I feel like my mindset was this is that I didn't know exactly what like alcoholism, drug addiction was entirely, right? But I knew it was a thing. And as far as I knew, it was, a genetic thing that some people had. And, and I known that, my dad's brothers were alcoholics. So I was stuck in a spot where I sort of thought, okay, some people are born with diabetes, some get cancer. Like I was just born an addict, an alcoholic, and I'm probably going to die sometime in my mid 20s. For people like myself, like there is no chance at help. I can't imagine a life without this. So, but at the same time, I don't want to disappoint those around me. So, although I'm not able to stop doing this, I'm going to try to do everything else I can on the outside to try to not appease, but to not let everybody down to like, the most significant degree. So it wasn't, I had no delusion about the fact that like the reality, this kind of the severity, but actually looking back on it, it also doesn't really feel like it ever happened. Like I'm like, that's pretty insane that I was like 16 years old, pretending to buy syringes for my quote unquote diabetic grandmother, at Fry's, like it kind of was happening. And I don't think I really realized until after I got sober, like sort of the depths to which it happened and the severity and how quickly it increased until it's there. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah. So you play music too. Were you active in the music scene at this time, or what were you doing with that?
so the irony is like, I'm a musician and I've been playing music, since I was 13 years old, but at the kind of quote unquote like depths of my addiction, right? Like I either never had instruments, I pawned and sold them all. So I had this delusion in my mind that like in order to be a good musician and an artist, right, I need like drugs and stuff to help fuel that creativity. But the reality was like whenever, all it was generally me sitting around paranoid and I hadn't played a guitar or an instrument, 2 years. So I really, music was a thing that I kind of fell in love with when I was young. And then after I got sober again, I kind of got back into it. So there was a solid 5, 6 year period where I rarely, if ever, played, and I didn't have an instrument or a home to keep an instrument in.
So
So
you weren't like involved in the local music scene or anything during those years, really?
I was, but usually as a liability. Like I was kind of the guy that was like hanging out, trying to get into shows for free. All my friends were musicians, but like I said, the majority of the people I hung out with weren't, they weren't heavy drug users and or like quote unquote alcoholics or drug addicts. So I kind of had to keep secret from everybody other than a few select people. So I was hanging out and I was wanting to be more involved, but like, I couldn't get I couldn't get it together. Like it just wasn't happening.
Did you have like two groups of friends, the groups that did hard drugs like you did and used like you did, and then the other group that was not doing that didn't really know that about you?
So, sort of. I had a majority of my group of friends. I had a couple different groups of friends, of which many are still my friends, and it was more like I had a couple people that I would sneak off, get high with, or stay with, dealers and stuff like that. But then a majority of the people that I hung out with socially were all, they were friends of mine that I worked with at a restaurant, or people I had met at school, or people I'd grown up with, or other musicians. So I kind of tried to, and I think probably on some level, if I could maintain this life, and looking in this social circle and stuff, once again, maybe if it looks okay on the outside and I'm still able to maintain these relationships, maybe the problem isn't as bad as I think it is. So it was like, I had a couple of people in specific areas, but then a majority of the people I hung out with kind of either didn't know or knew that I had a problem, but didn't really know the extent.
Right. So your parents wanted you to go to detox, and that was kind of your first time around a detox.
Yeah,
And
I had no idea. I mean, I understood the concept of detox. It was, I think, 2000. It must have been 2005. I think Subutex, like buprenorphine, had just come out. Like Suboxone, I don't know if it was trademarked yet, but they had put me on a Subutex, and I had this point, been using, shooting, 130 milligrams of methadone every day for the last, 6 9 months. So, and my goal was, how do I get out of here as quickly as possible? So I went into the waiting room, and like prior to admitting, I had stuck a couple syringes in my socks and some cocaine in a little film canister. I'm going to the bathroom, shooting cocaine, coming back, waiting. I'm walking weird. My mom's asking what's going on. I'm telling her, oh, I have this hemorrhoid. I need some cream. I got to go back in the bathroom. I go and do the intake. I have a 104 fever. I tell the lady I feel fine. And then I'm like, okay, how do I get out of here as quickly as possible? Because I just need to go get high again. And they put me on Subutex. So I was in there. I think I might have been in there for maybe 5 to 7 days. And I thought I had convinced the doctor, hey, let me do outpatient. Because in my mind, if I can do outpatient, I can figure out a way to sneak the drug tests. I don't have to get sober. My parents think I'm sober, and like it all works out. Needless to say, the doctor was smarter than I am. And now when I see clients coming to treatment, I had a similar experience where I'm like, I know what you're trying to do, but it's not going to work. He recommended I go to an inpatient place. So I went to like a residential treatment center for not necessarily substance abuse. It was just for kids coming out of juvie who really wanted to change in some way. My mom had, was a social worker and had worked with this guy. So I went into this residential treatment center for adolescents, and I was in there for 3 months. And that was the longest I'd been sober since, I started using it like 14, 13. But there was they had taken me to a certain 12-step fellowship like once a week. But there's no really working at the steps or understanding, what is alcoholism, what is addiction, what are the mechanisms of it, and like, how do I treat it? So I was kind of sober and kind of organically detoxed from that. But then the day I turned 18, I got out, and within a week I started drinking again, and then within a month, back on heroin and everything else.
so fast forward to your last time using and what happened and where you ended up there.
So, years past this point in time, I'm just about to turn 22. Like I said, I made it 3 out of 4 years of ASU. Then I had to withdraw. My parents were consistently kicking me out. I'm staying, at the dope house, wherever I can. And I think they're kind of at a loss. They had to set the boundary of like, hey, we love you and we want to see you get better, but we've enabled you for too long. So now it's time for, we can't watch you kill yourself. So if you're not going to get help, like, good luck. And I kind of tried to call their bluff, and they weren't bluffing, and they turned off my phone and everything. So then I'm stuck, and I'm kind of out, running and gunning for a couple months. And then one night I'm sort of having a breakdown, and it was actually I was living with my dealers, and the guy who's older guy was like, hey man, you should call your dad. So I call my dad, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm calling you. Like, obviously I love you, what I mean? But I'm like, I don't know what I'm asking for here. I can't keep doing this, but I don't think that there's any way to fix it. They see a counselor, and the counselor recommends, hey, there's 2 options. You can go to this treatment center in Atlanta, or you can go to the sober living in Phoenix. So once again, I didn't think it's possible to get sober. So I want to change, but not that bad, right? So I'm like, okay, I'll take the sober living in Phoenix. I'll have a place to shower. I'll figure it out. And, I'll kind of maybe get a few dollars, gain some trust back, and then I'll be able to figure out how I'm going to continue using successfully. I go to this sober living in Phoenix, and the first night I get there, they're doing a house meeting, and I'm hearing these guys talk, and I can tell like, oh, these guys, this is the first time that I'd heard and identified with people that were similar to me. They were actually, a lot of them were the same age, similar interests. And I could tell by the way they talk, like, oh, they had been where I had been. Not just like on the streets or like usage wise, but like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, like they were like bankrupt, broken, and like they understood this. Yet like they all appeared to be sober and like want to be sober, which I'd never encountered before. I legitimately didn't think it was possible to simultaneously be sober and enjoy life. So I kind of asked them like, what do I do? And they just start taking me to meetings every day and go to, Crossroads, just a bunch of meetings in Phoenix, and I'm pretty much tagging along. And I'm grateful that the guy in the sober living let me try this. Like, I think Banner had just started this like outpatient Suboxone detox kind of thing. So I was able to do that and taper off while still being in a sober living, which I think he like made a special exception for me. I'm sure that's much more commonplace now. But so I was able to do that, start going to meetings, detox off of that, and then like, quickly get introduced to 12 step, get a sponsor and start doing all that stuff. So I kind of, right, like, and this is, I think, important because I sometimes tell people like, hey, you don't have to be fully convinced that you necessarily want to or can be sober. But if you kind of trust that, hey, this person was where I was, and I believe on some degree, right, that they've changed and like they're not just, making it up. Like if you take the action, you're going to get some kind of result, So and when you're at a spot where you're hopeless and you literally have nothing to lose, I kind of accidentally got sober. I didn't have full intentions to do it, but obviously I had been miserable for such a long period of time that I had a level of willingness.
So you ended up in the right place by, I guess, good luck or just maybe God's grace or something, right? You
Yeah,
ended up in a place
right.
where you heard a message.
Yeah, in hindsight, I look back, at the time, I didn't really know what to attribute it to. But as I look back on it, you know, I I definitely think, I definitely attribute it to like, God or higher power. I'm not a huge fan of the word God. So but whatever. So higher power, some kind of spiritual experience doing for me what I couldn't do for myself at the time. And I have an immense amount of gratitude for that. So yeah, that's kind of how it started.
Nice. So, and how did you get from newly sober to deciding you wanted to work in the treatment field? How long did that all take, and
So
what happened
I
there?
Yeah, so and so I got sober end of 2008, and I still had one more year of college left. So I had I want to say that either it was prior to this or after getting sober, I was like business slash communication, which I didn't know what else to choose, so I kind of just chose that. But then I think I went to the office of the school place and I was like, hey, like what degree can I get with all these credits I have? Right. And like we have this interdisciplinary degree in psychology and sociology. And those are like two things that I've been taking a lot of elective courses in that I was like interested in. I'm fascinated by like the human like mind, like how does it work? Um, you know, either in theories or also like, you know, on like a physiological level. And then I'm also like, I was always fascinated by like history of social thought classes or sociology, like why do we do what we do in groups of people, how have we progressed as civilization over time. So I remember I had a teacher, and this was before I got sober, but it kind of had said, hey, you guys are all freshmen. This is what, if I can give you one piece of advice, it's this: don't worry about what job you're going to get, how much money you're going to make when you get out of school. Find out whatever you're interested in, pursue that, and I promise you that you'll be happy. So I finished with a degree from ASU and an interdisciplinary degree in psychology and sociology. And after getting sober, and I know this happens to a lot of people, I was like, this is what I want to do, right? I want to help people relay some kind of message. And so I start working at a group home for Native American kids as like a behavioral health technician. It's 2010, 2011. Then it closes. Then I spend 3.5, 4 years working at a nonprofit called Mark Community Resources, and that was specifically dealing with the seriously mentally ill population. A lot of clients who were had state funded services and designated SMI designation, and I did a lot of intensive work and community housing supervision. So I'm working, with clients, and they would often put me with the quote unquote high profile cases because a lot of these clients had like co-occurring substance abuse issues, but they didn't have a track for that. So I I found that like one of the things that I tend to be good at is when it's somebody who's struggling and suffering and I know they don't have the tools to like do otherwise, I have kind of like an unlimited amount of empathy and understanding, which is ironic because I have very little patience and understanding for like when I know somebody knows how to do better and they're choosing not to. So I'm working there for a while, and then my one of my business partners and co-founder, Dan, we're both in recovery, and I'm telling him that, hey, there's this treatment center opening up, and I'm thinking about working there. And he's like, hey, I'm opening up a treatment center. I don't know why I didn't think of you. Like I would like you to come on and work with us. So it was myself, and then Dan, Sean, and Talia, and then the three of them got the articles of incorporation for the company going, and our CFO David, and kind of came up with the mission statement and the idea. But really, it was the four of us sitting down, and we're honing our policies and procedures, employee handbook. And I kind of took, this leap of faith. I'd spent the previous 5, 6 years at a job where it was comfortable. I knew how to do it well, but there wasn't really an area for growth. And I utilized that time to be like a touring musician. Like I'm getting to tour the United States, play music, get a record deal, all this cool stuff that I want to do. And suddenly, I'm getting in my late 20s and I'm kind of thinking like, what's the rest of my life going to look like?
So did you see a future for yourself playing music at that time, maybe, or you weren't sure? What was that like?
So I have a lot of friends who are full-time musicians, and even the ones who are quote unquote like successful, right? It's a lifestyle, right? Like you have to commit to. Like you have to understand, hey, I'm probably going to be on the road like 9 months out of the year. Um, you know, Even with financial success, unless you blow up and become a giant band, right? Like I'm probably gonna have to work a job when I'm home or have some kind of side gig or hustle. So I kind of, and a lot of my friends are still musicians, even my bandmates. I mean, I'm still in the band, but I kind of made a decision like around this time. I was like, I can either pursue music like all the way, but I know it's a grind, and I don't know if like deep down in my core that's what I want. So I was able to kind of navigate both for a while. Like I'm working in behavioral health, I have a job, but also, I'm playing music. And then it kind of is like push come to shove, and starting a business. Luckily, around that time, I guess luckily or unluckily, depends on how you look at it. Like, few less tour offers came in and stuff like that. So I've still since then I've been playing music, and we're still recording, and I've done a few short tours, but I kind of made a decision like I'm not going to be a lifelong musician. Not because I don't love it, but not to that level. Like the people that I know that do that, and I have plenty of friends who are incredibly successful doing it. Like you're sacrificing a lot of things, right, for that. And like in my heart, like that kind of wasn't my. I love playing music, but that wasn't my overall goal, I think.
That wasn't really the lifestyle you're kind of looking for, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think after close to a decade of doing it, I think I just kind of was like, I love playing music, but there's a lot of things that it's a grind and it's difficult, and and I knew deep down like if that's not, if I'm not like 100% into this all the way, then I'm gonna have like regrets, and I feel like I got to do the things I wanted to, like touring the United States, playing with bands I wanted to, meeting a lot of other musicians and being in that scene. And so I kind of got to milk the best of both worlds while getting to do that without having to sacrifice a whole lot of my,
So what's the band you're in now? Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I mean, sure. So I'm in, it's a rock and roll metal band. It's called Take Over and Destroy. It was initially Toad, and there's a band from the 1970s called Toad, like a rock and roll band. So we, came up with that acronym. And it's a couple of my friends who been in the band are also now in recovery, and they're have gone on to do other projects. We're still recording. We just finished an album which we are self-releasing soon. We had signed a record deal, done a record. We've done a couple different like licensing or record deals. But I think also around that time, some other bandmates, had kind of other professional obligations to tend to. And I've seen this a lot, right? Where I have a lot of friends who wanted to, who are in already successful bands with momentum, but then, they want to start a family or, get married, and you kind of maybe have to give it up. So, we still play, I love playing music, and I kind of get to still play music, be part of that scene, do stuff, and I have a lot of friends who are, touring musicians full time, and be integrated in that without having to commit my full life to it. So which I also understand that there's sometimes a lack of respect of that in the music scene, because you're sort of like a lifer musician, and it's like, hey, you're not really living this full life. But I get, in my opinion, I get kind of the best of both worlds with that.
Right. So how long is the Scottsdale Providence been going on now?
So we opened in June of 2016. So I was, technically the first hire. And then we also hired case manager Marcus. And so kind of, the five of us sort of really came up with a program description, and we all didn't really know what our job, because not only were we starting, a treatment center, which none of us had run, like worked, all of us had worked in behavioral health. Dan had been a clinical director at Task, worked at Community Bridges, a bunch of places. Marcus had been in a bunch of places. Sean had worked, in every treatment center known to God for the previous 20 years. But, none of us had started a business before, right? And that was, like I said, I was at a point in life where I knew, hey, if this fails, I can go back to my previous job. I don't really have a whole lot to lose, but there's still a lot of uncertainty there. And it was slow, man. I mean, I watched a lot of other, friends of mine open businesses at the same time, same models that, they fill their beds right away and their program is booming. They have a really nice facility. We did it with very little money. But we kind of knew hey, this is our mission, right? At the end of the day, we do treatment because we care. We all work in behavioral health because we care about people, right? And we're passionate about this.
Would you say you feel a calling to do that? Maybe if you'd felt a calling to be a musician, you would have followed that, or
right.
a full-time touring musician, you would have done that. But you also felt this calling to work in the treatment field.
Right. And for whatever reason, like I said, this is not to sound arrogant, but I think that, for whatever reason, I don't want to call it a skill, but an ability to a strong amount of empathy and an ability to kind of relate and get stuff out of any kind of person, whether, they're significant mental health issues, depression, substance abuse, whatever it is, right? I kind of look at it, I think a lot of times, now our treatment center specializes, in substance abuse and co-occurring, and true co-occurring / strictly only mental health issues. So we have people who just enter for, severe mood disorders, severe trauma, borderline personality disorder, other things. And a lot of times I think that there's this idea that I have some staff, or maybe in recovery themselves, I don't know, I don't feel as comfortable talking about these mental health things. And I'm here's not that they don't want to, but, they feel they don't really know how to treat it as well. And not the clinicians. I'm talking about, more like the BHTs, the behavioral health technicians. And I'm it's, ultimately, right, strip that away. Those are but results of these underlying behaviors and issues. So, and I've always kind of had I've always liked to navigate that. Like I said, I find people fascinating. And why? Well, I wonder why it is you think or feel this way. Let's get to the bottom of it. Let's examine it. And then I'm sure there's a solution, right? You can't be the only person ever to have struggled or suffered with this thing. Obviously, my scope is limited. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a physician. I have a team of them. But, there's also that ability of one human being sitting down with another one, kind of figuring out let's get down to these causes and conditions, and let's figure out what it is that's going on. And just, hey, I've been there, I felt similarly, and and I've seen people change like this. So yeah, I would definitely say
Scottsdale Providence. You obviously then you take people with co-occurring disorders. What's kind of your I guess focus there, or your kind of treatment techniques or modalities, or what kind of approach do you take with these people?
So here's the thing: is that I don't want to say I have a disdain, but I dislike, quote unquote, marketers, right? Treatment specialists, marketers or business developers, because they spend a lot of time let's break down modalities, and I can name all the modalities we do, right? CBT, DBT, MI. We do EMDR, neurofeedback. We do group psychodrama. We do group psychotherapy, individual, family sessions. We have occupational therapist, case management, all of these different areas. If you're asking what we actually do, is that we're like a family. It's like a family atmosphere, right? We have a nice facility, and that's all great. But everybody that works, everybody that has been hired, and we all work together. We're friends. The full clinical team, pretty much everybody has equal voice and opportunity to express, what's the best trajectory for this certain client, which I know oftentimes isn't the case. It creates sometimes an atmosphere of frustration because we're all arguing over what we think is best for this client. But so what we do is, and this is something that I'm really proud of, right, is that we treat people what we say we're going to treat them for. So when I say hey, we treat for mental health and substance abuse, we have split groups, two separate curriculums, and some of the parts of them overlap. But when a client comes in, they get assessed, and it's are they mental health primary, mental health only? Are they substance abuse only, which is rare, or substance abuse primary? Let's create a specialized group schedule just for them. So so many clients have different group schedules, and it creates a lot of work. But we also have the kind of facility where clients just walk in my office and want to talk about things, or they get, they have a primary therapist, but they also talk to 3 other therapists a week, because like ultimately it's like we gave the people what they came for, and also like we genuinely care about what we do. Like I couldn't, it would be soul sucking to work at a place where like I didn't feel like I enjoyed going there every day, and also having a bunch of employees who enjoy their work as well. So like we set out what we said we were going to set out and do is like, hey, I feel like we can do this better than other people, and like and be successful at it. And
Yeah,
what
so
I
it
mean
sounds more
better,
like an integrated treatment model where you have a treatment for mental health disorders, but you also have a treatment for substance use disorders, and you're combining the two, right? Or, I mean, you're treating them both at the same time, but it's not exactly the same. Like you have groups for substance abuse and you have groups for mental health disorders. Would that be accurate? Or
yeah. So I mean, the different kind of, so we have like several different tracks, right? So a single client might be on a substance abuse, self management, self esteem track. Another one might be mental health, self management, self esteem, trauma track, right? So like we pick it per the client. And also a lot of times throughout the course of treatment, right? A client comes in and it might seem like, hey, substance abuse is the primary, but really there's a ton of unresolved trauma there. So let's get them more in some of these self-management trauma groups, and also let's throw them another therapist who really specializes in high complexity trauma. And so like let's get them, let's treat them a little bit more for that while they're here. And another thing that we do, um, that I'm proud of and something that will never change is, once a client enters our treatment facility, the determination on how long they stay isn't based off of, how long their insurance is going to authorize them for, or anything like that. It's always, how long does this client need to be here? So a lot of times a client insurance might cut them off, but we're like, hey, we're just going to continue, scholarship and treat you, because like it's not that effective to put someone in treatment for 30, 60, maybe even 90 days. And then you say, all right, go back home. Good luck. Right. It's like, let's slowly titrate them down. Let's have them, at a full PHP level of care. And then let's move them, down in IOP, and then maybe an extended like OP long-term aftercare where they're still getting seen by some of the specialists once a week or once a month for, up to like a year, including, med management and, occupational therapy, or, like
so, yeah, that
ongoing
sounds great. But
EMDR.
where does the money come to do that? I mean, it's, do you have donations, or where's that coming from?
So, I mean, I'm grateful that we're like, we're an out of network model. So that was the initial thought behind it, right? It was like, here's the thing though, is if we do that over time, we're gonna have a bunch of clients and it's gonna cost us money. Um, but sort of the inverse has happened because of that, right? Like a lot of our clients have done really well, and they, sing our praise, or, they refer other clients in. So it's kind of like having trust, like anything else in life, right? It's like if I give the best possible product and I do these things for, like, I don't believe in like pure altruism. I don't know if that's necessarily a thing. But like if we're doing what we believe is best, and like whatever, screw your insurance, I don't care. Or like, hey, sorry, your wife lost her job and she can't pay this, but we're not going to kick you out. Like, don't worry about it. We got you. So that has led to a lot of success, and then a lot of people referring people. And just so long as like we have enough people coming in, right, and like luckily, like insurance and or we have enough clients coming in that they're kind of able to offset the cost of that. And at some point it's, it does become a little cumbersome, because at some point, right, we're like, all right, these couple of clients have still been getting seen for 6 months, and they're still attending a couple groups here and there. But like ultimately, the cost of somebody to attend a group isn't. There's really no added cost, right? Like a person, it's a facilitator running the group, a little bit of time and maybe typing up a note and stuff. But you know, a lot of those clients, if they didn't weren't able to have some ongoing accountability, or like we introduced like an evening IOP also a while back, where a lot of people when they return to work, they can still have some ongoing structure and accountability and slowly step down. I guess we're kind of operating under the pretense of like do the right thing by the client for the right reasons, and like it will work out. Um, I mean, there's more foresight and planning in it than that, but ultimately that's kind of the way it operates. Um,
Well, I
and
mean, that's pretty cool to hear, because I mean, a lot of the stories you do see, or like you see these, client brokering in Florida and people getting paid to relapse, and so they can go back through the treatment center again, and just these dirty dealers, who are trying to make a buck on treatment, So it sounds like you guys are doing a good, honest job here and still coming out okay.
Yeah, and I'll say that that was something that was difficult at first because, like I said, we started off really slowly, and we started off with very little money. So, it was hard to watch, other places, blow up quickly, whether they're local or in other states. And I'm seeing all these people, and it seems like they have these super successful treatment centers, and they have 100 beds, and they're all full, and they got people coming in like crazy, and they're making a crazy amount of money. Meanwhile, I'm like, we're a month and a half in, and we've had like four total clients, and then, I'm working with, Marcus at the time, and I'm like, yeah, we're gonna have jobs in a month. I don't know. Um, but I also always kind of, and this is probably instilled in me at a long age, and luckily, like I have business partners who share the same vision. Where it's like, here's the thing: is that like the minute that we do, like we kind of cross our own moral or ethical, like we compromise ourselves. There's no, in my opinion, like you don't just like partially compromise yourself, right? Like either like you kind of cross that line and there's no returning, or you never really cross that line. So we just kind of, and it's hard now because I try to really put myself in that mindset of like, the first year or so where it's like, I don't know how, but every month we continue to survive and we're barely surviving. But like, let's continue to do the right thing. And then, suddenly you see a client who came in on day one and that client's, sober a year and you're like, this is why we do it. And I have a fundamental belief that like I know, like I've seen enough treatments to know like what poor treatment looks like and what good treatment looks like. And like, we have a team of people that care. And we truly have a very unique, like alumni program and like a very strong culture. So like, as long as we preserve that, I'm sure there will be a way that we'll figure it out. And it was, like I said, it was dicey for a while. But the plus side of that is like here we are, almost 4 years later, and I've seen, other facilities have to shut down or, significantly change their practices, or the way that they used to get clients no longer works. So now that, they have to try to go quote unquote legit. And then there's a big steep learning curve there. Whereas it was like we started off a lot slower, but now that we've sustained and grown, like we've always kind of grown to size and expanded, and it's never really slowed down. And when other people have been significantly impacted because, Google decides, hey, we're going to use legit script as a third party, verification system to ensure that, they can't, abuse Google AdWords, something that doesn't really affect our model that much. Like, hey, we get the certification, but it didn't really matter because the majority of our clients weren't coming from that same ad stream revenue, right? So it's kind of like we grew it organically. We focused on like, let's make a strong presence here locally. And then, then we can expand regionally. So like, because of that, it was really painful and hard. I'm not gonna lie, like it was hard for me to deal with for a period of time because I saw the angles other people had, and I was like, whether or not they can justify this, like at the end of the day, if we don't have a facility, we have nobody to treat. But I'm incredibly grateful that we kind of said, hey, we're not going to compromise our morals no matter what, and then we've got to watch this thing organically grow to a place where like I feel really comfortable with it.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and so your kind of business model kind of fits in with, I guess what you hear in recovery too, like if you're in a 12-step group, rigorous honesty and things like that, so it would be kind of hypocritical, I guess, or going against, what you've
Right,
learned in
right.
recovery to be doing some dirty dealing just to get your treatment center lucrative, right?
Right. And I mean, that's, the irony, I unfortunately, and just the reality is, 12 step, is a huge community. And a majority of those people, we're either manipulators or ex criminals or, whatever. And, and we're good salespeople or whatever it is. Right. So it's easy for us to justify and rationalize things. And I've seen a lot of people do that, whether it's in treatment or other areas. But I've always been sort of hesitant at like, like the there's you can try to get the short term reward, but like that's generally all it is the short term reward, and you're not looking at the long view, right? Whereas you know I started a place with a person who used to sponsor me and a bunch of people who were like really deep into recovery, where it's like we are going to practice these principles in all our affairs, and not to say that like we run a 12-step treatment center, because treatment is much more intense than just 12-step, like that's an aspect, that's kind of the social support system to the the treatment model. But you know let's apply these principles, and like, can we honestly like if I can't stay sober because I'm compromising my morals and and stuff to run a treatment center to help other people, like that's you know too ironic, but I will say that it was frustrating for me at times to hear like, hey, just let's trust God, and have we ever not been okay or whatever. And I'm like, that that doesn't produce results all the time. So at sometimes, it's me struggling with these things, and then other times it's me having to remind, the business partners, like, hey, like, remember this and how we got through that, like, um, but yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right.
So, how many beds do you have now, and what's the typical length of stay at your treatment center?
So right now we have like two houses, both of which can have a capacity of up to like 10. But I would say our average like census is we're hover around 40 to 50 clients. And but that's not all. So that ranges from highest level of care to lowest. So at the full kind of day programming, our houses stay pretty full, usually 70 to 80% occupancy. Um, but then we have another 20 to 30 clients on a weekly basis who are attending from out in the community. So either they, have, they were in the housing and they step back down, or, maybe their mental health issue is primary and like a supportive sober living environment isn't necessary, or maybe they have kids at home, or a wife, or or they can't leave, they're all of their obligations. So like, let's figure out where can we fit you in. Like, can we, can you come 3 days a week for full days, or like they need to return to work, so then they start attending evening groups. Like when I say it's like truly individualized and customized, it is like, I have 20 different clients right now that have 20 different schedules. I mean, they all occur within the same hours, but some of them are there, Monday, Thursday, Friday, full days. Some come half days, half the day. And we kind of say like, what do you need? There's times where a client's doing well, we step them down. Why don't you try the evening IOP 3 times a week? And then there's regression. So like, let's step you back up. Or like, hey, we're not going to try to over treat you. That's not the goal. So like, let's meet the client where they're at, and maybe like, they only need this level of care. So let's step them down. So I mean, all in all, probably about 40 active clients, but at the highest level of acuity, usually around like 20 or so.
Okay, so it's I guess we're a smaller size treatment center, or a boutique treatment center almost, because
Yeah, right,
you're
right.
customizing and catering to the needs of the client more, maybe. So, so what about like comparing to when you got sober and like the drug scene now with fentanyl and like this opiate epidemic they call it now? I mean, is it harder for like if you were say like a guy just like you trying to get sober right now? Is that what kind of different challenges are there right now?
I mean, I don't. So I feel like there's two parts to that question. I don't know if the challenges are any different, right? Like I think at its core, like addiction, alcoholism, significant mental health, like the challenge kind of remains constant. And the way you treat it or deal with it might change over time. I mean, I still am a proponent that like a good combination of medication if necessary, right? Like, so like say you have like, psychological imbalance and you need an antidepressant or you're bipolar, medication management when necessary, combined with a super intense social support system like 12 step, paired then with like therapy to address some of the things that 12 step doesn't necessarily address, like let's look at complex trauma, where like I feel like that's how we treat things, and like let's do it in a loving therapeutic environment. I don't know if that's changed, like the way the more of a turn to trauma informed care, or a bigger maybe a bigger focus on like DBT centered treatment. Like the clinical aspect has shifted over time. And some of those they find there's maybe more efficacy with EMDR treating trauma than previous methods. But as far as like trying to get sober, I don't think that that's changed. But what I do think is like I couldn't make it now as a drug addict. Like if I were to get high, like I would have died. I don't know how many times, right? Like it's incredibly lethal and dangerous. Like it's unreal to me. Like I've, in the past 2 years, I lost my best friend to an overdose, and to fentanyl. And then, and that was, a thing that I thought I could never face or deal with. And then, it happens. And suddenly, luckily I have a bunch of other supportive, sober people around me, and we're able to be there and show up for his family and everything. And then almost like a year later, one of the friends who was a pallbearer in that funeral, goes out, and then a couple months later he passes away. And it's like, and that's just a couple of the close friends, right? I've had a couple clients, who, didn't, weren't all the way sold on being sober, right? And left, and a few of them, haven't made it, or, a lot of, old friends. And so I think that what I do know is that it seems like it's a little bit more acceptable in the culture to like be taking fentanyl. Like I feel like, it's definitely a little bit more like it seems a little less, I guess, crazy to like be taking fentanyl or like drinking lean or whatever it is, popping benzos, than, when I was getting high to like be shooting heroin, right? Like I feel like for whatever reason, it's not like people know it's an issue, but it seems like it's kind of like vaping and like jewels. Like I know that there's like a lot of like, younger kids that, would hit the jewels, but they had never smoked a cigarette, nor would they, and they like view them as two different things. So I think maybe socially it might be a little easier to get into, but I don't think that it changes the underlying issue of like, I don't think I don't think it's any different on getting sober, right? Is there a level of willingness? Be willing to do the work, and like this work will produce these actions. I don't think it's any harder to get sober, um, but maybe the availability is greater. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems to me like it's a better time than probably ever before to be in recovery, just because of all the resources and all the, um, I guess, publicity, or um, at the cultural society level, there's just so much more talk about it, and resources for people to use. Right? Would that be true
Yeah,
when
and
you're?
what I think is cool, and one thing that I will say is that I think that there's just more awareness overall, whether for substance abuse or just general mental health, right? Like I think that oftentimes I listen to a lot of podcasts, right? And I read a fair amount of books and articles, and when I hear people talk, it seems like there's definitely um, you know, in this quote unquote, there's this like woke culture or whatever, right? But a positive result of that is that I think that there's definitely more people are like, hey, here's, I struggle with depression. Oh, I do too. Thanks for sharing that, right? Or like, hey, I struggle with this drug issue. Oh, me too. Like, there's hope for me, right? So like, I think that there's that side where it's much easier, I think. And I never had this issue. I'm fortunate that I was raised with a therapist as a mother who, constantly, encouraged us to like, use I statements and say how I felt, and facilitated like a therapeutic, loving environment. But I think that there's definitely more. If people are more accepting of like, oh, you have depression, that's weird, right? Or this person's bipolar, they must be totally crazy. And it's like, no, like, what does that actually look like? Oh, and there's a lot of people, and so I think in that way, it's almost easier for people to talk about their issues and stuff that's going on. But in some ways, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because then there might be that ability for other people to be like, hey, I get it, I've been there too, it's not that bad, versus like, hey, there is severity to this stuff, and like, there's a difference between me, getting some help, and I'll tweet something, and some people tweet something nice back, but like, like, or like this needs like actual like clinical intervention, so I think there's pros and cons, but I think there might be more awareness of it, as there should be. I mean,
Yeah, so
I
we're
know.
kind of pushed into like relying more on online resources right now because of the stay-at-home coronavirus situation. What is your kind of feeling about like recovery apps and like using online resources for recovery? Is that, I mean, I'm sure there's some benefits to it, but is like possibly relying on that too much? Is that maybe a setup for failure?
um Short answer, no. I think that, um, for example, right, like we've had to adjust some things at our clinic, right, due to coronavirus and trying to limit the amount of people coming from out in the community. So like our evening IOP, which traditionally took place at the clinic, we now hold virtually. As a result, a lot of old clients who have either moved back to different states or some in other countries, right, have been able to attend and be a part of that, whereas normally they can't be. So there's that benefit, right, of like people, there's more accessibility to more people. The downside, or I guess to answer your question, is like I think that, like anything, right, like therapy and 12 step and all these things, I think it's another added tool that's awesome. But I think any sole reliance upon any single thing too much could be detrimental, because if that thing isn't all the way effective, or if you're not able to access that thing, then like how do you cope or deal with it? I think I do not believe, to the best of my knowledge, that there's any substitute for like human interaction. Like we humans are social creatures, right? And we thrive. Cortisol is released in the brain when I get a hug from a loved one, right? So like there is something that happens in a human interaction that I don't know is necessarily replicable in an online transaction. But at the same time, if it's between I'm not going to have any transactions or interactions, or I will with somebody online, then like that's a good place to start. Or if I'm, if I have, let's say I have my, the 12-step community here locally, but if I go on a trip, I still have access to like meetings virtually and stuff. Then it's like, okay, cool. I wouldn't have otherwise attended one, maybe, or maybe I didn't have the time. So now I have this resource available. I think telehealth is an awesome kind of thing that I know we're using. And I think that one of the, I guess, sort of silver linings of this coronavirus is that it's forced, you know, a lot of providers to understand, like, let's utilize the infrastructure we have and do as much telehealth as possible. That way people can get seen, and realizing, okay, now I can see people, people who might not otherwise go to their doctor, go see their psychiatrist, or they don't know how to get to a counselor's office, or or their schedule doesn't allow, like, now they're able to do those things. So it is I think that it's cool. I look at it like an added thing, but I'm also hesitant to rely solely upon technology because, like I said, I think that the human interaction part of whether it's treatment or, 12-step meetings or just kind of social interaction, there's something that you cannot replicate online. But that being said, I still think that these apps are, like, a lot of them are cool and beneficial and can help people.
Yeah, for sure. So like, I guess apps that can tell you where a meeting is or link you to some kind of discussion or
Right.
give you some kind of, I don't know, recovery motivational things. I know there's a bunch of them. I have a couple of them, but, so, but yeah, ultimately, we all need human interaction as we were isolating when we were in our addiction. And now, like, we need people to kind of, you know, I get high, we recover, right? I mean, that's
Hmm.
kind of the way I look at it.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I mean, technology in that regard, as far as like giving technology, I think is, huge because the same thing applies to music, right? Like, if you lived in a small town in the middle of nowhere, you were kind of, and then the 80s or 90s, right? The only music or scene you were aware of, or what was ever local, right? What was at that record store, and the information I had was whatever was sold at the library, and generally whatever the prevailing religious denomination was is what my religious denomination was. And now, whether it's that or treatment or recovery, like, now, I have the opportunity to explore any kind of music, look at all the different kinds of therapies, see what kind of resources are out there, no matter where I'm located, given I have a smartphone or an internet connection. So from that aspect, I mean, technology is amazing. But there's also, there's the pros and cons, and, like, with that, I think it breeds additional isolation, reliance upon it, and kind of, like I said, getting away from the physical world and the importance of, we as a society, we've progressed this way and we've had reliance on each other, and the interaction between people versus the online interaction we have, how does that, what are the pros and cons there? I mean, that's a
Right. And then the smartphone kind of, I guess, phenomenon is like, I see younger people, millennials, is like their phone is always in their hand. Right. So, I guess kind of the thing with that is like, um, sometimes I feel like they don't know how to interact without the phone, or it's almost like, it changes the way of socializing. So you see a group of people sitting together and they're all looking at their phones, right? So
right.
they're not, maybe not even interacting, right? Or they're interacting through their phones even when they're sitting next to each other. And then I guess smartphone addiction is actually a real thing too. Have you kind of,
Mhm.
um, thought about that or dealt with that in your treatment?
So, not as like a primary diagnosis, right? Like, I haven't taken, um, moments to, video game addiction, smartphone addiction, stuff like that. I don't know. There's, a lot of that stuff is a result of, you fix some of these core issues, and a lot of that, whether it's secondary or tertiary kind of deferred needs, those, lack of other coping skills replace that. So suddenly those issues become easier to deal with. But what I will say, is that a lot of times, right, like, and it's pretty, it's not like, that uncommon for like a treatment center. When you first come into treatment, right, it's okay, turn in your phone, you're like on a blackout period, or like, you need you to focus just on being present in here, and like, it's a rigorous schedule and you're in a lot of groups and stuff. And you'd be surprised, people, the ultimate goal is, like, everybody's like, how soon can I get my phone back, right? But what happens is, most times 2 to 3 weeks. But you take people who literally couldn't imagine going about their phone for an hour or two. So 2 weeks later, they're like, most of the time it's like, hey, I don't care, I'll get it back whenever. Like I miss being able to listen to music, which I'm like, I understand. Get an iPod. I mean, music's great. I'm not gonna, but like a lot of times we think like, hey, I couldn't survive without this, or I don't know what to do. But it's like, oh yeah, but like the only way I'm able to be present and actually work on these things is like to be present. And a lot of times, I had a fear of this, like, when cell phones, like when iPhones first came out, it's like I kind of had this fundamental fear of like knowing myself. I was like, if I don't monitor like my engagement on this, I could see myself getting sucked away. It's like I've always been like, okay, when I'm at dinners with family or whatever, like put the phone down. I tried, like, if I'm even like scrolling on Twitter, Instagram for more than 10 minutes, I'm like, what am I doing? Like I like to see some things, but it's also like, could I be doing something useful or something that's like impactful? So because I don't tend to use it for like research purposes that much or whatever, like I'm pretty good with my phone. But you're right. It creates this, and I think we're just beginning to see it. And we're like on the precipice of this, like, there's going to be, whether it's, increased, young adolescent, suicide rates or whatever due to like bullying online, stuff like that. And this ability that like my self-worth is tied up in, what, like what, like my ability to be accepted online.
Okay. So, wow, that's a lot of good stuff. I think we're kind of at the end of our planned time here. That was a really great interview, Alex. I appreciate you, taking some time out of your evening to talk to us here. Where should someone go if they want to, get some more information on Scottsdale Providence?
So, I mean, if they want, information on Scottsdale Providence specifically, they can just Google Scottsdale Providence Recovery Center, go to our website, scottsdaleprovidence.com. All the resources are there. But also, if it's not Scottsdale Providence, totally understandable. If you or a loved one or yourself is like, hey, I want to get help and I don't know if I can, like, reach, like, there's, just type in like, how do I get help? Call a couple places, figure out like wherever you're located, like, hey, like if I want to get some kind of treatment, is it possible? Yes. I've yet to see a person come with a presenting issue that couldn't be fixed or dealt with on the gambit. But find a place where you feel like, hey, these people care. They're doing what they are for the right reason, and like they inspire some hope. So Scottsdale Providence, specifically, Google it. Go to our website. You can email me. Reach out to me. My work email is alex.porter, PORTER, at scottsdaleprovidence.com. But once again, I'm more concerned about people that need help getting it wherever it is. Obviously, I believe my treatment center is the best because I work there and I see what we do every day. But that's not to say there aren't a ton of other great options out there.
All right. Good stuff, Alex. Well, I appreciate you coming on, being only
Yeah, man.
the second guest on my podcast. And I think that was a great interview. So thanks for that. And I guess that's a wrap for tonight.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You bet.